Bat Milsom, and I'm here on behalf of Real Vision to interview Mr. Jim Rogers.
Hooray.
Welcome, Jim, and thanks for having us.
I am delighted to be here.
We're hoping to hear your views today on the economic situation in Asia and the situation between China and the States in the trade war, what's going on in Hong Kong, and maybe a few thoughts on the macro world in general at the end.
Well, Matt, my advice is why don't you watch Real Vision? you can get answers to all those questions.
Here we are.
And you and I can go drink beer. Why are you asking me about all of that?
Hong Kong, the situation in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
How you see it developing from here?
Well, I don't pay that much attention because I know I think it's all going to blow over eventually. China seems to be handling it very well, certainly smarter than most people. Most governments handle things like that. The best advice, the result is probably going to be that people should buy Shenzhen or Singapore because some money will certainly leave. Hong Kong doesn't. I mean, Shenzhen has a huge industry of its own. I mean, they're a gigantic technology city, as you know, and it's very easy to get out of Hong Kong and go to Shenzhen. And secondly, people are going to be worried about the future of Hong Kong, rightly or wrongly. And Singapore is the logical destination, the logical alternative. And even if it doesn't leave, in the future, people, when they think about Asia, they're not going to think about Hong Kong, most of them. So they're going to come to Singapore or Shenzhen or find some other place. I think the future of Hong Kong is continued decline. The only reason Hong Kong became Hong Kong was because of 1949 and Mao Zedong. But now you don't need Hong Kong anymore. Shanghai was the largest financial center between New York and London before the war, Second World War. And China's opening up, so we don't need Hong Kong anymore, and it's going to continue to decline.
So you would expect the peg to go at some point, therefore?
I certainly would. When the renminbi, the Chinese currency, is convertible, yes, I would expect the Hong Kong dollar to disappear. Who needs it at that point? It's an extra expense, it's an extra problem, it's an extra everything. But right now, the renminbi is not convertible, not fully convertible, so they're going to keep the Hong Kong dollar. But no, I would expect it to disappear, not just to drop the peg to the U.S. dollar. It's going to disappear.
Completely.
Yeah. Why? Who needs it? It's an extra expense, an extra hassle.
I mean, in terms of the size of the actual currency board, it wouldn't be that much of it. It wouldn't be a big ticket relative to the actual currency of the mainland.
No, it would not be. They would barely notice it. Right. As I said, Shanghai used to be the financial center, and it will be again. Or certainly will not be Hong Kong.
Right. You think the currency is now being weaponized in terms of renminbi and how it's been moved above 7? It's obviously having a bit of a rally at the moment pre-October the 1st, I guess.
Matt, any country which has hundreds of billions of dollars of sanctions or tariffs imposed on it, the currency is going to go down, period, full stop. So it's not just the Chinese. The Chinese are apparently letting it go down. They're not trying to control it. But anybody who has that kind of axe chopped on it is going to be affected because it theoretically is going to hurt your balance of trade very seriously when you have those kind of tariffs imposed. And maybe China's saying, okay, we'll let it go. We're not going to stop it. But to try to stop a currency declining when you've had hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs hitting you, you have to be affected. And to try to stop that decline would cost gigantic amounts of money. I'm talking about basic economics. I'm not talking about China, U.S., anything. I'm talking about basic economics.
So you think that weakens over time?
Of course it weakens over time. As long as those tariffs are imposed, certainly it's going to weaken the currency or any currency over time.
And I guess the 25-year plan being to take away the dominance of the dollar?
There are already lots of people trying to do something about the dominance of the dollar. As you know, if the U.S. gets upset with you, they slap you. They just stop you using the U.S. dollar, or they stop you trading the U.S. dollar, which many people say, wait a minute, this is supposed to be the international currency. That's not an international currency if it can be stopped by one nation. And the U.S. is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. No country in history has ever been this highly in debt. So the U.S. dollar's got very serious fundamental problems and emotional and psychological problems, political problems, I guess we should call them. So people are already, the Chinese, the Russians, and the Brazilians and other people are coming up with an alternative currency and an alternative banking system to the IMF and to the World Bank and to the clearing system. So there's already a movement afoot to eliminate the dominance of the U.S. dollar. The fundamentals are certainly against it, just as they were against the pound sterling once upon a time and other currencies. Now you have political and psychological forces trying to change that, so it's going to happen. I own a lot of U.S. dollars, but my expectation, my plan is it's going to get overpriced in the next turmoil. It might even turn into a bubble, at which point I'm going to sell my U.S. dollars because that's going to be the end of the real dominance of the U.S. dollar.
But that could be a 10-year.
No, I don't think it'll be 10 years. It could be 10 years. It could be 30 years. Who knows? I'm not very good at market timing, but I would expect it to be in the next period of turmoil, which will be coming in the next 2 or 3 years.
So recently China struck the oil deal with Iran. Doesn't seem to be making a lot of headlines, but it strikes me as a big story given they're able to pay in their currency at a massive discount to spot.
That's part of what I'm just talking to you about, that people are already trying to do something about the previous serious dominance of the U.S. dollar, and you already have 2 big countries. Iran's got 80 million people or something, and China's got 1.3 billion. They are already eliminating the U.S. dollar, which would have been unheard of 20 years ago. Even with those 2 countries, it would have been unheard of 20 years ago, but now it's happening. Russia and China are starting to do the same sorts of things, which would have been impossible. They wouldn't have even known how 20 years ago, but now they're figuring it out and they're doing it.
And I guess One Belt, One Road is all a part of that plan.
Yes, I'm not sure that they sort of, they're probably independent. The elimination of the dominance of the U.S. dollar is path A. One Belt, One Road is path B, but they happen to work together, yes.
$17 trillion now of negative yielding debt?
Never happened in world history, Matt. It's absurd. It's a bunch of misguided bureaucrats and academics who don't know what they're doing. They're hoping, but this has never happened in world history. Never in world history has this happened, and it's going to be a gigantic disaster for all of us.
How does it end?
Badly. No, bankruptcies.
Yep.
There are many states and cities, not just in America. Germany's got cities that are in trouble. Forget, we haven't even talked about Spain yet, or Italy, or some of the other places. No, many places are going to have serious problems. And once interest rates go back to normal, it's going to cause a lot of bankruptcies and problems around the world.
I just don't see how they can.
They cannot. No, they cannot. It is physically, economically, any word you want to use, impossible.
For rates to normalize?
Yes. Well, they can normalize, but somebody's going to have to pay a serious price.
Absolutely.
We're not going to sit around here with negative interest rates for the next 30 years. It's never happened. Now, no reason it cannot happen. Anything can happen, but it's not going to happen.
But all of those numbers, that's all outside the States.
Well, you say
Pretty
outside
much.
the States. It's hard for everything to be outside the States with 17 trillion U.S. dollars. The States is involved whether we like it or not.
Absolutely.
Because everybody's involved. Germany, Japan, these are big economies we're talking about. America cannot escape the effects.
So let's say we've got a quiet period ahead of us, I would have thought, given the 70th anniversary of the PRC.
We do have a quiet period ahead of
In
us?
the next 3 weeks. Very short.
3 weeks, maybe 3 days.
In days, I'm counting.
Okay, maybe 3 weeks.
Up to October, the Golden Week, let's say, 1st of October.
Okay.
I think beyond that, the potential for the proper weaponization of the currency and the actual renminbi to properly move starts to rear its ugly head.
Well, you're exactly right, but that's more Washington, D.C. Washington is the one who keeps banging away at this.
You think they're right to?
I think they're right to.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I've never known a trade war to be right. I've never known anybody who won a trade war. I've never known a trade war to be good for anybody, any time in history. Now, Mr. Trump knows he's smarter than history. He doesn't have to worry about it in history, but history would indicate that he's not right and that there's going to be a problem one way or the other. There are ways to, we've always found ways to sort out problems like this. I cannot find it, I'm sure there must be, anybody complaining that the Chinese have stolen their intellectual property. You know, Congress had a hearing recently, and they couldn't find anybody. Couldn't find any to verify.
Who was willing to say it?
Well, was willing to say it, yeah. Maybe
Right.
that's it. Maybe you're saying they've been stolen, but they didn't want to tell Mr. Trump. They
Right.
didn't want to help him. Be that as it may, yes, Chinese companies come to America. American companies go to China. They start doing business in those countries. They have to take their production methods. If you're General Motors and you start producing somewhere else, you're not going to leave your production methods back in America. You have to take them with you. So is that stealing, or is that just the normal course of business? There are people who are in favor of trade war who's saying that the Chinese are thieves for intellectual property, and I'm sure they are. I'm sure there's some, but not worth this. You know, when America took over from the UK, you know, America's destroyed the UK shoe industry, the UK tailoring apparel industry, totally destroyed it. You think we weren't taking their knowledge? Or if you, in today's terms, you'd say we were stealing their intellectual property. We were, but that's the way the world works.
That's competition.
That's competition. Yes, that's movement of capital. That's movement of people. That's the way the world has always worked and always will.
So let's say we're in a world of 8 or 9 to the dollar in terms of renminbi. I'm assuming we're thinking massive deflation, bankruptcies galore in North Asia, competitive devaluations.
Bankruptcies galore in the world,
Right.
if that happens. China has said, Beijing has said, they're going to let people go bankrupt. It's not like America. Well, we never let anybody go bankrupt. Or London, we prop up everybody. Tokyo, oh my God, we prop up everybody. But China, communists that they are, say, well, no, we're going to let people go bankrupt. If they fail, too bad. That's how that's how capitalism works. I don't know if they mean it. I don't know if when it happens, if they'll really let people go bankrupt. They're starting. Some are going bankrupt. So you're going to see it. But when it happens in China, it's going to shock a lot of people, including me. I just told you it's coming. But a lot of other countries and companies are also going to have serious, serious problems with that sort of thing. It's going to make China much more competitive to the rest of the world. And that's going to have big effects in a lot of places, including the debt markets, where a lot of debts are written in U.S. dollars.
Given the amount of indebtedness in China, per se, as a multiple of GDP, you'd think that they'd have to create a massive inflationary wave post that deflation in order to deflate away the debt.
Well,
eventually.
It's not just China.
No,
I mean,
absolutely not.
the U.S. is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. The U.K., it's mind-boggling how deep in debt as a percentage of GNP the U.K. is. There are many countries. You get out the statistics, and you cannot conceive that anybody could get that deep in debt. Japan has got staggering internal debts. We all do. So it's not just China. Sure, you're going to have bankruptcies in China. But I'll remind you that America became the most successful country in the 20th century. But along the way, we had 15 depressions, massacres in the streets, very little rule of law, horrible civil war, and yet we still became the most successful country in the 20th century. China's going to have a lot of problems, but I'm teaching my children Chinese. I'm not teaching them in Danish.
So where do you see the Sing dollar going through all of this?
Well, the Sing dollar, like all currencies, is going to go down against the U.S. dollar because the U.S. dollar is going to go much higher. And Singapore doesn't like to talk about its debt, but Singapore has debt too. The IMF says that the Singapore debt is over 100% of GDP. So there is serious debt here. Now, Singapore would say, yeah, but we got a lot of assets too. They do. There's no question about that. But once interest rates start going higher, normally your debts get worse and your assets don't get better. So the Sing dollar is going to suffer too. But it's mainly because the U.S. dollar is going to be so strong in the turmoil. People look for a safe haven. People think the U.S. dollar is a safe haven. It's not. The fundamentals are horrible. Nobody in his right mind would buy the U.S. dollar. But I own a lot of it because I'm not in my right mind. But I'm assuming that the rest of the world is not in its right mind either, and they're all going to buy it for traditional reasons.
So where do you go when that dollar blow-off happens?
Well, you want to know how to get rich in 30 seconds. My plan, probably, the renminbi may be convertible by then. They say it, the Chinese say it will, who knows. If it is, it will be down a lot because people will be dumping it, we presume, to get out. So my dollars will be high, the renminbi will be low, and I will go from U.S. dollars to renminbi. And/or gold also often goes down when the U.S. dollar gets very, very strong and financial markets are in turmoil. So I'll sell some of my dollars and buy renminbi, some of my dollars and buy gold. It's very easy to get rich. We just did it in 40 seconds.
That's a good plan. So gold, you're not a gold bug, but you've always been there.
No, I own gold. I've owned gold for a long time. You know, I first bought my gold in 1971. It was illegal for Americans to buy gold in 1971, but I did. I went up to Canada. I went to Switzerland and to Canada and bought a little bit of gold. Listen, it's tiny. I didn't have any money in those days, but even the tiny little money I had, I bought a little gold, and I've never sold any gold since 1971, and I've continued to buy it over the years. Not a lot in recent years. I started buying more this summer because I could see what was happening, but no, I still own plenty of gold and silver.
I guess the fact that it doesn't yield much or anything doesn't bother anyone now.
Bonds don't yield anything either. You know, most things don't yield anything these days.
So the yen is still seen as a safe haven?
It is seen as a safe haven, not by me, but it is. It's like the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is not a safe haven, but people think it is, and that's the status of the yen as well. To my shock, I have had 2 #1 bestsellers in Japan this year. It's a mistake, but I have. And both of them talk about, the second one is called A Warning to Japan.
Right.
And I talk about, this place is going to be a disaster. If I were 10 years old, I would immigrate, or I'd get a AK-47 and start learning how to defend myself. You know, the debt is going up every day, staggering debt every day, and the population has been declining since 2010. This is not a good scene for the future. But many people think, just like they think about the U.S. dollar, they want to be there. I don't, but I am in the U.S. dollar.
So in terms of equity markets per se, in particular?
Well, it's hard for me to find places to buy now. I don't own any U.S. stocks. It's near an all-time high. If I buy anything, it's Russia, buying a Russian stock as we speak. Nothing in China, but I'm always looking in China. You know, these markets are down. I prefer to buy low and sell high, or try to buy low and sell high. It's difficult for me to find anything. Venezuela is illegal for me. I'm an American citizen. I'd like to buy in Venezuela, but I don't want to go to jail. You know, I'd rather be poor out of jail than rich in jail, so I'm not buying there. I cannot buy in North Korea. I would love to buy in North Korea, but I'm a citizen of the land of the free, and we're not very free in the land of the free. So it's hard to find things for me these days. I bought a few shares of Zimbabwe recently. That's another disaster, but it's still legal. I think it's still legal for me to buy shares in Zimbabwe, but it's hard to find a place.
I just wonder whether this argument of there being no alternative with that amount of debt that's yielding negative, does it drive an equity market into an insane blow-off top?
That's why I don't have big shorts at the moment, because that may very well happen, especially if the U.S. dollar becomes more and more attractive to people psychologically. Yes, it could very well happen.
So you see negative rates in the States, perhaps?
I see perhaps. Yes, I certainly perhaps see them. You know, those guys don't know what they were doing. When Bernanke was there, he said the U.S. Central Bank, Federal Reserve, can buy anything it wants. We can buy gold mines, we can buy businesses, we can buy shares, we can buy bonds. So they haven't even started doing it with shares yet. Japanese central bank every day prints money and buys ETFs. U.S. hasn't gotten there yet, but Bernanke said there's no reason we cannot.
I just think it should be ultra virus. They shouldn't be allowed to trade equities.
See, you've got a sound sense of history and a sound sense of economics. That's a problem in 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
People like you and me, nobody wants to listen to people who are sound.
Well, I guess the States is not doing it yet, but Switzerland, as you say, Bank of Japan.
Oh my God, Switzerland! When I was a kid,
but they're not even buying Swiss equities; they're buying Apple, right?
No, I know the Swiss National Bank, which when I was a kid, owning Swiss francs made me feel so safe and secure. But now, the Swiss currency is backed by Apple. It's backed by Google.
You couldn't make that up.
Google, Microsoft,
that is
Facebook.
Crazy.
The Swiss currency, the Swiss Central Bank has backed the Swiss franc with Facebook.
Not a lot of people know.
I know.
BOJ and SNB, they're listed.
Oh, I know.
They're listed stocks.
Yeah.
So you can see the fact that they're long the American, tech sector because the S&B price is going up. So
But if you ask them,
what are you doing with it?
they are very reluctant to talk about it. They don't like to reveal how much they've done. No, somebody there is embarrassed. I'm not the only one embarrassed. Somebody in Switzerland is embarrassed about what's happened.
But how are they allowed to do it? You know what I mean? I just don't get it.
Well, Bernanke says American
Anyone
Central
can do it.
Bank can do it. I don't think there are any prohibitions. Nobody thought to write them down. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that, by the way, you cannot buy Apple. You cannot back your currency with Google.
With another currency stock, though, if you're buying Swiss stock, maybe.
As far as I know, there's nothing in anybody's charter which says you cannot buy anything. Bernanke said we can buy anything. We, the central bank in America.
I just don't see it happening in the UK, for example. Maybe I'm a snob.
What?
I can see them giving out money, but not buying stocks.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Well, there's not much difference, but okay.
Yeah,
so maybe
true.
the UK, yes, it is one of the older and historically one of the sounder central banks, and so maybe they remember, but there's such gigantic debts there. And if Scotland leaves, well, Scotland's got the oil, and Scotland's not going to say, oh, guys, you can keep the oil. We're going to leave and join the EU, but you keep the oil. When Scotland goes, it's already mind-boggling, but if they don't have the oil, they don't have anything to sell anymore. They have the English language, but there's more and more competition for that. They don't have Triumph motorcycles anymore.
Tourism, that's all we've got.
Yeah, well, look about tourism, sure, but and the town will go down a lot, and that will make it cheaper for tourists, but that's not going to save them.
So what does it take for the central bankers to realize that negative rates are a bad thing?
Catastrophe. The
And,
only way it's going to happen is catastrophe.
and that means initially, I guess, the European banking system and the euro with
Lots
it.
of bankruptcies, maybe even central banks go bankrupt. These things have happened before. It's not outlandish for a nation to go bankrupt, or banks to go bankrupt, or even central banks. There's nowhere. Even 30 years ago, even though you're knowledgeable and educated, you probably could not have named many central bankers. And most people in the world had no idea that there were central banks, much less who they were. But now everybody knows. Everybody even knows Ben Bernanke, and he's not even there anymore. Everybody knows the names of these people because they become godlike. Everybody assumes that Alan Greenspan knew everything. A guy wrote a book about Alan Greenspan called Maestro. Oh my God! And he was an educated reporter who wrote that book, as though Greenspan knew what he was doing. Greenspan didn't have a clue. Greenspan has done more to ruin the world, and, well, not more than most people. Well, more than most people. He did his share.
But if you're in a competitive situation with your currency, how can you not let your rates drop? Even though you want it, it takes somebody to stand up and say, I'm going to have a positive interest rate, and it's going to be better for my banking system.
Sure.
The rest of the world, your currency is just going to go bananas at that point, which is kind of where the States
History shows that governments have gone bananas
True.
many times and done unbelievably foolish things. History is replete with bureaucracies and politicians and governments who have done absolutely absurd things. You think it can't happen again? Of course it's going to happen again.
So you'd rather see sterling out of... You think Brexit is a sensible thing for the UK?
Well, I'm not a voter in the UK, but what they should have done was vote to abolish Brussels. Brussels is the problem.
Right.
The EU is not the problem. The euro is not the problem. The problem is and was Brussels. And, you know, I used to speak with Nigel, you know, the guy who did all this. And I said, Nigel, no. Vote to abolish Brussels. But the problem is he couldn't do that. You know, the British couldn't say, okay, we're going to have a European-wide referendum and abolish Brussels. That's the problem. And by the way, as you probably know, Brussels is now starting to lose its power in the EU because more and more politicians and lunatics are saying Brussels is the problem. And so they're starting to lose power relatively. What England should stay in now and say, okay, we're going to stay in and we're going to help control Brussels because there's a lot of people in Europe now who are saying we got to do something about Brussels. That's the problem. It's not the EU. It's not the currency. It's those unelected, absurd bureaucrats who don't know what they're doing, but they tell you what to do, and you have to do it because you're a citizen.
So do you see... I know there's a lot of promotion of Ray Dalio's thoughts around the parallels of now to the 30s, it rhyming a little bit with previous history. Do you see a similar situation?
Well, I don't know what Ray has said, but if anybody who can read history knows that there are many similarities now. Oh my gosh, no, countries becoming bankrupt, becoming deeply in debt, countries being protectionist, countries starting to close off. I mean, this has all happened before. It certainly happened in the 30s. You know the rest of the story. You know what happened then. But Mr. Trump is smarter than history, so we don't have to worry. Mr. Trump knows he can handle history, and none of us should worry because he's smarter than history. And even though people say, you know, trade wars are bad and have often led to shooting wars, don't worry. I'm smarter than history.
Yeah, he does seem to be able to just move to the next person once he's had a go at somebody and then slackened off. He just goes, the next target is going to be, you know, Europe once he's done with China, even though nothing's actually resolved.
The problem, Matt, is that when things get bad, you know, so far the American economy has held up well because of you know, a lot of money printing, a lot of government spending, cut taxes. I mean, it did everything possible to hold up the American economy, and it's held it up. But when things get bad in America, as they will, Mr. Trump is not going to say, it's my fault. I got it wrong. Trump is going to say, those evil Germans, those Koreans, those Canadians, and he's going to come back hard with more and more, whatever you want to call it, and the situation. We're going to have the worst bear market in my lifetime. And I can tell I'm older than you, so it's going to be the worst in your lifetime too. What I suggest you do is watch Real Vision, and you'll get educated, and you'll see how bad things are, and then you'll get prepared. Most people who turn on the internet or turn on the TV say, wow, look at this. Things are great. Mr. Trump tells you every day. If you watch American TV, he will explain to you things are really, really very good. And so you don't worry. So maybe you need somebody crying wolf. Maybe you need somebody saying, wait a minute, guys, wait a minute. Look at this. So maybe Real Vision is the last vision for all of us.
So you think he gets back in?
Get back into what?
Trump 2020?
Yeah, I would expect he would. I think I know it's very hard to dislodge a sitting president in America for many reasons. Right. And I would suspect that's the same too this time. Now, we got rid of Coolidge and Hoover. We got rid of Hoover because the market collapsed. But we don't have much time for that because the election is only, 13, 14 months away now. So if the market really collapses in the next 13 or 14 months, then I would change my view. But there are enough things he can do, and which is why it's hard to get rid of sitting presidents, to prop things up long enough to get through the election. So I would, if I were betting, and I'm not a betting man, but if I were, I would bet that Trump will be reelected.
a lot of speculation that he might actually start to swerve the Fed and play the currency markets himself via the Treasury.
What, Trump will start buying, what, U.S. dollars or renminbi? What's he going to buy?
He's going to be selling dollars.
He could do that, yes, and he might. He might. He cannot force the Fed to do it. I mean,
No.
But he could. He could browbeat them. He could certainly force the Treasury to do that, to sell U.S. dollars. But first of all, I'm not sure the market would put up with it. It would for a while. Obviously, it would for a while. But eventually, the market, as I said to you before, eventually the market's going to say to these guys, we're not going to play this game anymore. This is an absurd, ludicrous game. It's never happened before. We know it's not going to work. We're not going to play anymore. No, okay, maybe he would try, but I don't think it's enough. Maybe it's enough to save the election. I said to you before, it's so difficult to dislodge a sitting president. There are lots of things he can do. If he needs votes in that state, he spends a lot of money in that state. Well, his opponent cannot do that. The opponent can say, look what a terrible person he is. He's spending money in your state.
True.
And the people say, thank you, spend more money in my state. We'll vote for you.
He can almost play the Fed to his own fiddle, right, I guess, at the same time. He can blame them if it goes...
He certainly can blame them.
Yeah.
Whether he can persuade them, and he seems to be persuading them now, is another question. But sure, that's what I mean. If he goes in there and threatens them or does X or does Y, sure, he can. That's the problem when you're the president, or the advantage when you're the president.
I see Powell as having a bit more of a backbone myself. I just think he's his own guy. Really, he's not a PhD economics. He's a...
Well, that's the best news.
Yeah, absolutely.
No.
He's got 1,000 of those.
The rest of them were Ivy League PhDs,
Yeah.
which is bad news. We'll see.
So I could see there arising a bigger conflict there, or you think, between Powell and...
No, I can see a huge conflict. And there's going to, I mean, the Federal Reserve, its debt went up by 5-6 times in 10 years. If I had said to you 20 years ago, a major central bank in the world is going to increase the debt on its balance sheet by 500% in 10 years, you would have said, get out of here. We're not going to talk to you anymore. You're not even smart enough to talk on TV. What are you talking about? It's inconceivable that it could have happened, but it's happened. And so, sure, they have a problem too. How far can they go? How far can any of us go?
It surprises me that volatility is so cheap then, right now.
The debt worldwide is the highest in world history. Interest rates are the lowest in world history. In 2008, we had a big debt problem. China, which had a lot of money saved for a rainy day, started spending the money and helped save the world. But even China now has debt. China can't save the world anymore. The central bank came riding in with its printing presses, helped save the world. That's getting late for all the printing presses in the world. It's getting late in the day.
It's the rate of change as well as debt in China that's extraordinary. Just
Oh, no, I know.
Galloping.
But to repeat, fortunately, China has said, we'll let them go bankrupt. I don't think they will. Not that they're lying. I think they believe that they're going to let people go bankrupt. But, you know, they haven't had this kind of problem in decades. So their bureaucrats and their academics haven't felt the pressure of people calling up saying, you must save Chinese civilization. This is Chinese history, our image, our integrity. No, they haven't had that gigantic pressure from everybody in the country. Save me, save me. They're saying save Chinese civilization. What they really mean is save me.
Yeah.
They haven't had that yet.
And Xi as a leader seems to be much more of a Maoist than ever before. To me.
I'm not sure Maoist, but they're certainly closing off in that sense, yes. Deng Xiaoping started opening up, and Deng Xiaoping said, you open the windows, you're going to get some flies, but you're going to get fresh air and sunshine. And the fresh air and the sunshine are worth the flies. He seems to be saying we don't want flies. You know, and the last 40 years, much of the progress has been 18-year-olds in a garage doing crazy things on the computer. Alibaba, Microsoft, the names go on and on and on. And these were just kids doing wild, crazy things on the internet, which was open and free to nearly everybody. But you start closing these things off, and it's going to slow progress. It's going to slow things down. Whether we like it, I mean, history's always shown that. You close off and you go into decline. It does seem to be happening, not just in China, even in the U.S., but it does seem to be happening more and more.
So
maybe we're in for the dark ages again.
I don't know. I mean, it's almost that you think about where you're going to head, what currency you're going to get into, where you're going to be safe. Do you know what I mean? When you start thinking about
this. Of course I know what I mean. I don't have a job. I got to figure out a way to save myself,
But you made the move to Asia on the back of those thoughts, I guess, yes. That's going to be a Pacific century.
Well, I moved to Asia because I know that the 20th century is Asia, 21st century is Asia. I wanted my children to know Asia and to speak Mandarin. That's the best preparation I can give them for the 21st century. So that's why I'm here. And of course, Asia is continuing to develop and boom and ahead of the rest of the world. There is some debt in Asia, but nothing like in the West. Most of the Western countries are really broke, especially when you pull in the pension plans. I mean, Europe's got gigantic pension, U.S. too, gigantic pension obligations, which they'll never be able to meet.
Demographically, where does that end up?
It's already starting to ruin a lot of people. And Asia will have problems, but nothing like some that are rising in the West. So I came here for my kids.
And the world of agricultural investment for you is still a...
Yeah, agriculture has been a disaster for 35 years or so. The average age of farmers in America is 58. More people in America study public relations than study agriculture.
Right.
The highest rate of suicide in the UK is agriculture. Japan, the average age of farmers is 68. Nobody becomes a farmer. You go to Japan now, they're huge stretches of land. They're just empty. They can't find anybody to farm them. The farmers have died. The kids have gone to Osaka. There's nobody to farm that land. And you want to be a farmer, go to Japan. You can get a lot of land, cheap. And that's true. I mean, Australia, Canada, all of these countries have very, very aged, old farmers, men and women. Millions of Indian farmers have committed suicide, as I'm sure you know. No, agriculture is a disaster. And the Chinese have a word. The Chinese word wei ji? It means disaster and opportunity are the same. And they are. If you can survive the disaster, you're going to make a lot of money with the opportunity.
I guess the commodity complex per se, the softs are on their knees-ish for the last 5 years.
Well, yes.
But the agri-businesses are actually doing okay in the States.
Yeah. But, things like sugar, sugar's down over 80% in the last 40 years. What do you know that's down 80% in the last 40 years, my IQ? Other than that, there's not much that has declined and deteriorated, like some of the agricultural products.
It's a difficult bet to make, given climate change, too.
Well, yeah, I mean, climate change is taking place. It's taken place for thousands of years. Go back and look at trees and soil layers and iceberg layers. We see that climate change has always been taking place one way or the other, and it seems to be happening again. And of course, that's going to be great for some farmers, disastrous for other farmers. The key is to be the farmer that it's great for, not to be the farmer that gets wiped out because of climate change. The Sahara Desert, which is the size of the continental 48 states, used to be a huge agricultural area. Pigs, cows, wheat, corn, everything. Huge. We had climate change. We had ecological change. The rest of that story. So if you were a farmer in Algeria 2,000 years ago, you probably didn't do very well. You should have moved to Iowa 2,000 years ago.
Would it be too much to ask your asset allocation now?
You can ask. I don't know. I don't sit around. I don't have a committee, Matt.
No.
I don't have anybody to answer to.
Nice.
I know I can still pay my bills. I do own some gold and silver. I do own a lot of U.S. dollars I've told you about. I'm short some junk bonds, short the ETF, Russia, China. I don't own a lot of shares anywhere right now because, the Japanese market I sold out of. I used to own a lot of Japanese shares. Sold out completely.
Why was that?
I bought them so well. It's not often I get it right, so I'm going to brag for a minute.
Do.
The Japanese market was very, very cheap, and I started buying. And then the tsunami. Remember the tsunami?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Everything collapsed. I bought a lot. And, they've gone up a lot. They've tripled since then.
Yeah.
But then I could see Mr. Abe And the talk got stronger and stronger and stronger, and they'd already printed lots of money. The central bank said, we'll print as much as we have to. That's what they said. They said it out loud. It's not some, crazy guy saying it. So I said, what else can happen? Well, what else can go right? I mean, they spent a lot of money on infrastructure. They bought a lot of securities. So I sold out. I mean, so far I'm right, but don't worry, I make plenty of mistakes. And
I guess JGBs don't even trade anymore, right? Because there's no float.
There's nothing to trade. I mean, Why would you buy them? Who's going to buy them except the central bank?
So they have to keep going.
I told you, I'm going to Japan tomorrow. I have this big bestseller saying, a warning to Japan. If they keep going.
As a book?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know that.
No, it's the #1 bestseller.
Congratulations.
I'm shocked. I've had 2 #1 bestsellers.
What was the other one?
I forget the name. It was some Japanese. It was something like A Warning to Japan.
But these are specific for that market? Or they were global?
2 books
right.
in Japanese. They were translated. My English was translated into Japanese.
Wow.
2 books in 2019 have been #1 bestsellers by me. This is a shock. How could this happen? I'm more surprised than anybody. They called me up last March and said, you got to come to Tokyo. I said, why? I said, your book's #1 bestseller. I forgot about the book. The book resulted from some reporters coming here and interviewing me like you.
Good job.
For several hours.
Right.
They said, we're going to publish it. I said, okay, go ahead. I don't care. Forgot about it.
So you got a book tour now?
Yeah, I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm going tomorrow for a book tour in various cities of Japan, promoting A Warning to Japan.
And what was the essence of that? Was the demographics or the...
If you're 10 years old, you better get out. Or if you're 10 years old, you better get an AK-47 and learn how to use it.
You didn't hold back?
These are no... See, I mean, it's simple. I say to them, they will say, of course, he's a foreigner, don't worry. The Japanese don't like foreigners. And so they'll just say, whenever they say they don't like somebody, say he's a foreigner, so you don't have to listen to him. But I say to them, yeah, okay, I'm a foreigner, but this is arithmetic. It's addition. The debt goes up every day. That's simple addition. And it's subtraction. The population goes down every day. Central bank has been printing huge amounts of money. This is just simple addition and subtraction. Forget that I'm a foreigner. And for some reason, both of them became #1 bestsellers. I guess it's because nobody in Japan ever says things like this. I don't know why it became bad. Listen, I'm shocked.
Do you have any views on SoftBank?
So far, they've made a lot of money, but I don't know enough to say much more than that.
Right.
I read that problems are developing, but I have no enough knowledge to say anything other than that.
I guess WeWork is the speculation that there's issues there for the float.
Well, WeWork is not their only asset.
No.
At SoftBank. I mean, what I read about WeWork, WeWork may be one of those things. Do you remember in 1999, I think it was called Pets.com or something? Yeah. It was one of those things. It was when people talked about the end of the bull market or the signal or the sign that it was over. It was
that
Pets.
IPO.
That was, that may be WeWork now.
Right.
But there were plenty of them in 1999. But that's the one that people often bring up. I was not sure that. I wish I had been. They bring that one up. Now, if you look at the current bull market, maybe someday in 10 years we're all going to look back and say, they rang that bell. That bell was called WeWork.
Ding.
That was the sign that we were coming to the end. It's always something that people look back on that it may be WeWork.
I mean, the amount of questioning around the IPO pricing makes you think that the greater fool game may have just come to a grinding halt.
I've never read the prospectus, but I've read a lot in the papers about the story, the company, the IPO, the CEO, etc. I'm sure you have too. Mm-hmm. I read it and I say, this is 1929. This is 1999. This has all happened before.
They'll have 9s in them.
Yeah. Let's see, 1899. Well, anyway, I mean, I read this sort of stuff and I say, oh yeah, this has happened before. I remember reading about things like this in previous bull markets, previous bubbles.
So what brings you to an investment then? Is there a sector, or is it an idea somebody pitches to you, or?
No, it's usually, the nature of who I am. I'm always looking,
Right.
or I'm always listening. And if I stumble on something, I'm not out looking like I used to, but if I stumble on something, I often do homework, and then, this Russian stock that I'm buying, I stumbled on it. The more homework I do, the more I buy, and I continue. But it's usually I will stumble on something.
Public, this is a public stock.
It's a public company, yeah.
Sector? Which sector would it be?
You're a very good reporter, but I'm not going to tell you, because
haven't
if
bought
I
enough
told
for it.
you, you would know exactly what I'm buying.
Okay. I'm sure it wouldn't be that easy to spot.
There are plenty of disasters in Russia. Everybody hates Russia now.
Yeah.
So I'm on, Russia's on my list. Anyway, I will probably buy Russian government bonds in rubles again soon. I own Russian government bonds in rubles. The yield is very, very high. The ruble is hated. Russia's hated, etc.
Any other markets that are particularly hated that you fancy?
Well, I told you Venezuela, but you and I cannot do it. I cannot do anything in Venezuela. Zimbabwe, I bought a few shares of Zimbabwe. Some of the North Korea, but that's illegal too. I'm looking, but the part of the problem is there are few markets that are hated so much. I am buying Russia; it's still hated, but most markets, even Germany. You look at Germany, it peaked, 2 years ago? Been going down since. But it's not cheap. It's not hated. Germany's still a very large and vibrant economy. So no, I don't see many right now where it jumps off the page to me and says, oh my God, you got about this disaster. I would love to find something like that, but I'm too lazy.
I'm thinking that's probably a good place to stop, Jim.
Then I'm too lazy. A very good place to stop. I commend laziness.